The alarm sound echoed through the bridge of the time's eternal wisdom asterisk. Commander Zexthari's 4 eyes focused on the data flowing across his screens. His blue-scaled fingers moved quickly over the controls as he read the emergency signal. "Commander," called his second officer, Nalthek, "we're receiving a distress call from the Outer Rim. Unknown species under attack by Korthak forces." Zexthari nodded slowly. The Korthak were a problem that appeared every few decades. They were like space locusts, destroying everything in their path before moving on. Usually, the Galactic Confederation dealt with them quickly and cleanly. "How long have they been fighting?" Zexthari asked. 3 weeks, sir." Zexthari's eyes widened. 3 weeks? Most species lasted 3 hours against a Korthak attack. His tactical computer was already calculating the best approach for evacuation. "Prepare the rescue ships," he ordered. "We'll save whoever we can and then deal with the Korthak ourselves." The journey to the Outer Rim took 2 days. When they arrived, Zexthari could hardly believe what he saw. The space around the third planet was filled with debris from both Korthak and unknown ships. But the unknown ships were still fighting. "Sir, the defending fleet is primitive," reported his tactical officer. "Basic fusion drives, simple ballistic weapons, and crude energy shields. Yet they're still alive," Zexthari murmured, studying the battle data. The unknown ships moved in patterns he had never seen before. They seemed to ignore standard tactical doctrine completely. "Hail their flagship," he ordered. The main screen flickered and showed a creature unlike any in the Confederation database. It had pale skin, small dark eyes, and brown fur only on the top of its head. The creature looked tired, but determined. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force Ship Times Defiance *, the being said. "Thank you for responding to our distress call. I am Commander Zexthari of the Confederation Fleet. We're here to evacuate your people. Please prepare your civilians for transport." Captain Chen's expression didn't change. "With respect, Commander, we didn't call for evacuation. We called for help to fight." Zexthari blinked all 4 eyes in confusion. "Captain, your technology is clearly inferior to the Korthak. Evacuation is the logical choice." "Maybe for you," Chen replied, "but this is our home. We don't run. Your casualties must be severe." "We've lost 40% of our fleet," Chen said calmly, "but we've taken down twice that many of theirs." Zexthari felt something strange in his chest. His species, the Veltar, were known for their emotional control and logical thinking. They never took unnecessary risks. The idea of fighting when defeat was certain seemed insane. "Captain, may I come aboard your ship? I would like to understand your situation better." "Of course, Commander. Fair warning, though, we're not as fancy as your ships." An hour later, Zexthari stood in the shuttle bay of the Times Defiance *. The human ship was indeed primitive, but it was also something else. It was alive with activity. Humans ran back and forth, fixing damage, moving supplies, preparing weapons. Despite their losses, they seemed excited. Captain Chen met him at the airlock. She was smaller than he expected, barely reaching his shoulder. Her uniform was torn and stained, and she had a bandage over her left eye. "Welcome to the Times, Defiance *, she said with what humans called a smile. "Sorry about the mess. We've been a bit busy." As they walked through the ship, Zexthari saw things that confused him. Human crew members were laughing and joking even as they repaired battle damage. In the medical bay, wounded humans were already asking when they could return to duty. None of this matched his understanding of how intelligent species should behave under stress. "Your crew seems unconcerned about your situation, Zex," Thari observed. "Oh, they're concerned," Chen replied. "But being scared doesn't help anyone. We've got a job to do." They entered the ship's command center. The technology was indeed primitive. but it was being used in ways Zexthari had never seen. Humans had connected civilian computers to military systems. They had attached mining equipment to weapons. Everything was held together with some kind of silver tape. "This is our tactical display," Chen said, pointing to a screen showing the battle area. "The Korthak are massing for another attack. Probably tomorrow." Zexthari studied the display. The Korthak had overwhelming numbers. Even with his advanced ships, victory would be difficult. "Captain, I must ask again. Why won't you evacuate? Your people could live to fight another day." Chen turned to look at him directly. "Commander, how old is your civilization? The Veltar have existed for over 10,000 years. We humans have only had spaceflight for about 300 years. In that time, we've fought wars, survived disasters, and explored dangerous places. We've learned something important." "What is that?" "If you always run from a fight, you never learn how to win one." Zexthari felt that strange sensation in his chest again. It was uncomfortable, like his body was warning him about something. But warning him about what? "My fleet will provide support," he heard himself saying. "We'll coordinate our attack patterns with yours." Captain Chen's smile grew wider. "That's all we wanted to hear, Commander. Let me show you what we've been planning." Kreenstein. For the next several hours, Chen and her officers explained their defensive strategy. It was unlike anything in Confederation military doctrine, where Veltar tactics focused on minimizing risk and preserving forces. Human tactics seemed to embrace risk as a tool. "We call it controlled chaos," explained Chen's tactical officer, a young human named Lieutenant Rodriguez. "The idea is to make the enemy react to us, instead of the other way around." "But the casualty rates," Zexthari began, "are acceptable," Chen finished. "Commander, we're not trying to survive this battle. We're trying to win it. There's a difference." As Zexthari returned to his ship that evening, he carried with him something he had never experienced before. For the first time in his life, he was beginning to understand what other species called fear. Not fear of death. The Veltar had long ago made peace with mortality. This was something else. This was fear of the humans themselves. They fought like nothing he had ever seen. They treated impossible odds as merely difficult problems. They laughed in the face of destruction and called it Tuesday. And now he was going to fight alongside them. Back on the Times, Eternal Wisdom *. Zexthari stood looking out at the human fleet. Tomorrow, they would face the Korthak together. He had a feeling that after tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same again. "Prepare for battle," he told his crew. "And prepare to learn something new." The next morning brought more surprises. Zexthari had arranged a joint planning session between his officers and the human command staff. What he witnessed challenged everything he knew about military procedure. The meeting took place aboard the Times Eternal Wisdom *. Captain Chen arrived with 3 of her officers, carrying what appeared to be crude data tablets and drinking some kind of hot, dark liquid from metal cups. "Coffee," Chen explained when she noticed Zexthari staring. "Want some?" "Fair warning. It's strong enough to wake the dead." Zexthari politely declined. His species required very specific nutrition, and unknown substances could be dangerous. The tactical briefing began normally enough. Zexthari's officers presented their standard battle formations, precisely calculated movements designed to maximize firepower while minimizing exposure to enemy weapons. Then the humans presented their plan. "So here's what we're thinking," said Lieutenant Rodriguez, pulling up a rough diagram on his tablet. "We take our cargo ships, load them with explosives, and ram them into the biggest Korthak vessels." Zexthari's tactical officer, Commander Yelnara, made a choking sound. That's suicide." "Not if we use remote control," replied Chen calmly. "We've been working on that. Had some success too." "Some success?" asked Zexthari. "Well, the first 3 ships missed their targets completely, The fourth one hit, but the explosives didn't go off. The fifth one worked perfectly. Took out a Korthak battlecruiser. Yelnara was staring at the humans like they had grown extra heads. You used trial and error? On live targets? During combat? How else do you learn? Asked Rodriguez, taking a sip of his coffee. The simulator can only teach you so much. The meeting continued with more examples of human tactical thinking. They discussed using civilian mining equipment as weapons, converting passenger ships into troop carriers, and something called aggressive negotiation, which seemed to involve ramming enemy ships while broadcasting surrender messages. The idea, Chen explained, is to confuse them long enough to get close. Then you hit them with everything you've got. After the humans left, Zex Thari's bridge crew sat in stunned silence. Sir, Yelnara finally said, their casualty projections are disturbing. They're planning for 40% losses and calling it optimistic. 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 They're calling it optimistic. Zex Thari nodded slowly. What did you make of their equipment modifications? Completely against safety protocols, replied his chief engineer, Dalmor. They've connected systems that should never be connected. They're using civilian technology to enhance military hardware. But does it work? Dalmor hesitated. According to their data. Yes. Somehow, it works. Their weapons are outputting 20% more power than they should be capable of. Their shields are lasting twice as long as the specifications suggest. It makes no sense. Later that day, Zex Thari decided to observe human operations more closely. He visited the Times, Defiance Times again. This time, focusing on how the crew worked together. What he saw fascinated and disturbed him in equal measure. In the engineering section, he watched a human technician named Sergeant Murphy working on a broken energy rifle, one of the advanced Veltar weapons that had been damaged in the previous battle. Murphy had taken the weapon apart completely and was rebuilding it with human components. He was using some kind of gray adhesive tape, metal wire, and what appeared to be parts from a food preparation device. What are you doing? Zex Thari asked. Murphy looked up, his hands covered in grease and the gray tape. Fixing your gun, sir. The power coupling burned out. But I think I can reroute the energy flow through this old microwave transformer. That weapon cost more than most human ships. Yes, sir, and now it's going to work better than before. Murphy finished his modifications and activated the weapon. The energy output readings were 30% higher than the original specifications. How? Zex Thari asked. Murphy shrugged. Sometimes you just have to try things and see what happens. Your people built this thing to be safe and reliable. We need it to be dangerous and effective. That evening, Zex Thari joined the human crew in their dining area. He had expected to find them somber and worried about the coming battle. Instead, he found them laughing and telling stories. So there I was. A young pilot named Jessica was saying, flying through an asteroid field with half my engine blown off, and Rodriguez comes on the radio and says, Hey Jess, want to see something cool? I had an idea, Rodriguez defended himself. You used a mining laser to carve a path through solid rock while we were traveling at combat speed. Like I said, it worked. The humans continued sharing stories of impossible escapes, ridiculous improvised solutions, and battles won through sheer stubbornness. They spoke of friends who had died as if they were still present, keeping their memory alive through humor and respect. Zex Thari realized that humans didn't just fight together, they lived together in a way that made each individual stronger than they could be alone. Commander, Captain Chen said, sitting down across from him. You look troubled. I am trying to understand your species, Zex Thari admitted. Your methods are completely illogical, but your results are undeniable. Chen nodded. We're not logical. That's true. Logic tells you what you can't do. We prefer to focus on what we might be able to do. Well, but the risks are part of the equation. Commander, Has your species ever faced extinction? Zexthari considered the question. No. The Veltar have always been able to avoid such situations through careful planning and superior technology. We've faced extinction 6 times in our recorded history. Natural disasters, wars, plagues, you name it. Each time, logic said we should give up. Each time, we decided to try something stupid instead. And each time, it worked? We're still here, aren't we? Chen smiled that strange human expression again. Commander, tomorrow, we're going to fight an enemy that outnumbers us 50 to 1. Logic says we should run. Our instincts tell us to fight. Which do you think will win? Zexthari spent the rest of the evening thinking about that question. When he returned to his ship, he called a meeting with his senior staff. Tomorrow, we fight alongside the humans, he announced. I want you to study their tactics carefully. I believe we may learn something valuable. Sir, Yelnara said carefully, their methods are completely contrary to Confederation doctrine. Yes, Zexthari replied. That may be exactly what we need. As he prepared for sleep, Zexthari realized that the strange feeling in his chest had grown stronger. It wasn't just discomfort anymore. It was something more complex. Something that made him want to understand these impossible creatures who turned disasters into opportunities and treated certain death as merely another problem to solve. For the first time in his life, Commander Zexthari was beginning to feel what humans called inspiration mixed with terror. Tomorrow would either prove human methods brilliant or suicidal. He suspected it might be both. The Korthak arrived at dawn with the force of a cosmic storm. Zexthari watched the sensor readings in growing horror as ship after ship appeared from hyperspace. The tactical computer kept updating the enemy count. 500, 800, 1,000 ships. Finally, it stopped counting and simply displayed overwhelming force detected. My God, whispered Commander Yelnara. They brought an extinction fleet. Extinction fleets were the Korthak's final solution. When they encountered resistance that lasted more than a few days, they would gather everything they had and destroy every living thing in the system. Zexthari had read about them but never seen one. Sir, Confederation protocol requires immediate withdrawal, his communications officer reported. Command says we should preserve forces for a counterattack. Zexthari looked at the human fleet on his screens. The 50 remaining human ships looked like toys compared to the Korthak armada. By all logic, they should retreat, regroup, and return with a proper force. Open a channel to Captain Chen, he ordered. Chen's face appeared on the screen. Behind her, Zexthari could see her crew working frantically at their stations. She looked calm, almost peaceful. Morning, Commander, she said. Looks like our guests brought some friends. Captain, my superiors are ordering an immediate retreat. We can return with a full battle fleet in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Chen raised an eyebrow. Commander, in 2 weeks, there won't be anything left to save. These are our people, our home. We fight here, we fight now. The odds are impossible. My computers calculate a survival rate of less than 3%. Chen's expression didn't change. Then, we'll have to make do with 3%. Commander, we didn't ask for your help to run away. We asked for your help to win. Zexthari felt that strange sensation in his chest again, stronger now. Captain, what you're suggesting is suicide. Maybe. But it's our choice to make. Chen paused, then smiled that dangerous human smile. Besides, we've been working on something special. Want to see Plan Omega? Before Zexthari could respond, his tactical officer called out urgently. Sir! The humans are moving their civilian ships forward. On the display, Zexthari watched in amazement as hundreds of human civilian vessels, cargo ships, passenger liners, even small personal craft, began moving toward the Korthak fleet. "Captain, what are your civilians doing?" "Fighting," Chen replied simply. "Commander, everyone on this planet knew this day might come. Everyone prepared. The cargo ships are loaded with every explosive we could find. The passenger ships have been converted to carry our best pilots. Even the personal craft have been armed." Zexthari stared at the display. Children's toys were visible through the windows of some smaller ships. The humans had turned family vehicles into weapons of war. "This is madness," he whispered. "Yes," Chen agreed. "It is." The Korthak fleet began its advance, moving in the precise formations they had used to destroy dozens of worlds. They came forward, like a wall of death, certain of their victory. Then the humans struck. It wasn't like any battle Zexthari had ever seen. The humans didn't form proper battle lines, or use coordinated tactics. Instead, they swarmed the Korthak fleet like angry insects, attacking from every direction at once. Cargo ships loaded with explosives rammed into Korthak battleships. Personal craft, too small to show up on sensors, slipped through the enemy formations and targeted critical systems. Passenger liners opened up with improvised weapons that shouldn't have been able to damage military armor. "How are they penetrating Korthak shields?" demanded Yelnara. On the communications channel, they could hear human voices calling out targets, coordinating attacks, and laughing as they scored hits. One voice stood out above the others. "This is Grandpa Joe in the Times Sweet Dreams asterisk," came a scratchy old voice. "I'm going for the big ugly one in the center. If this works, drinks are on me." They watched as a tiny civilian craft, probably a family vacation ship, streaked toward a massive Korthak dreadnought. At the last second, the ship's emergency beacon activated, broadcasting a children's song at maximum volume. The explosion that followed took out 3 Korthak ships. "How?" Zexthari asked. "How is this possible?" "Commander," came Chen's voice. "The Korthak have never fought anyone crazy enough to use children's toys as guidance systems. Their computers don't know how to target something that's broadcasting happy birthday while carrying enough explosives to crack a moon." The battle continued with increasing chaos. Human ships, that should have been destroyed, kept fighting. Civilian craft held together with tape and prayers delivered killing blows to military vessels that had conquered star systems. But it wasn't enough. Despite their impossible courage, the humans were being overwhelmed. Zexthari watched ship after ship disappear from his sensors. The brave voices on the communications channel grew fewer and fewer. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "human casualties are approaching 60%. Confederation protocol requires immediate withdrawal." Zexthari looked at the tactical display. The logical choice was clear. Retreat, preserve his forces, return with proper reinforcements. It was what any sensible commander would do. On the screen, he watched a human medical ship, clearly marked with peaceful symbols, ram itself into a Korthak carrier. The explosion destroyed both ships, but it also created an opening for other human vessels to attack. "Captain Chen," he called out. "What's your status?" "We're getting our butts kicked," she replied cheerfully. "But we're taking them with us. My ship's taken heavy damage, but we're still in the fight." As if to prove her wrong, a massive explosion rocked the Times Defiance asterisk. When the smoke cleared, the human flagship was barely holding together. "Captain, you need to abandon ship." "Negative, Commander. As long as this bucket of bolts can still shoot, we're staying in the fight." Zexthari felt something crack inside his chest. Not physical damage, something else. Something that had been solid and logical for his entire life suddenly became fluid and uncertain. "All ships," he heard himself saying, "prepare to engage the enemy." "Sir?" Yelnara looked at him in shock. "Confederation protocol." "Can go to hell." Zexthari snapped, using a human expression he had learned. "We're not running." "Tactical. I want ramming solutions for our heaviest ships. Engineering, overload all weapons systems. Communications, tell the fleet, we're fighting like humans today. His crew stared at him in amazement, but they followed his orders. The precise, careful Veltar fleet began moving toward the Korthak forces with new purpose. For the first time in his life, Commander Zexthari was choosing courage over logic. The feeling in his chest wasn't discomfort anymore. It was fear. Fear of what he was becoming. Fear of what he was willing to sacrifice. Fear of the humans who had shown him that sometimes the only logical choice was to abandon logic completely. Let's go show them what real fear looks like, he said, and meant it. The Time's eternal wisdom times charged toward the enemy fleet, followed by every ship under his command. Behind them, the remaining human vessels rallied for one final assault. The real battle was about to begin. The moment Zexthari's fleet joined the battle, everything changed. The Veltar ships, built for precision and calculated warfare, suddenly became instruments of controlled chaos. Zexthari watched his tactical displays with fascination and terror as his crews began copying human tactics. Eternal wisdom times to all ships, he broadcast. Forget everything you learned in the academy. Today, we improvise. Commander Yelnara looked at him with wide eyes. Sir, are you ordering us to abandon military doctrine? I'm ordering us to win, Zexthari replied. Target their command ships. Ramming speed. The bridge went silent for a moment. Then, slowly, his officers began implementing orders that would have been considered insane just hours earlier. The Time's eternal wisdom times charged toward a massive Korthak battleship, all weapons firing. But instead of the careful, measured approach taught in Confederation military schools, they flew like the humans. Wild, unpredictable, dangerous. Direct hit on their shields, reported the weapons officer. No penetration. Again, ordered Zexthari. All power to forward weapons. Everything we have. Sir, that will overload our energy systems. Then let them overload. The ship shuddered as every weapon fired simultaneously. The energy feedback caused sparks to fly from control panels. But the Korthak ship's shields flickered and failed. Now ram them, Zexthari ordered calmly. The bridge crew stared at him, but they obeyed. The Time's eternal wisdom times slammed into the enemy vessel at full speed. The impact threw everyone against their restraints. But when the shaking stopped, the Korthak ship was dead in space. Status report, Zexthari called out, pulling himself back into his command chair. Heavy damage to our forward sections, reported his engineer, but we're still functional. Sir, we just destroyed a ship 3 times our size. On the communications channel, they could hear cheering from the human vessels. Nice work, Commander, came Captain Chen's voice. Now you're getting the hang of it. Across the battlefield, other Veltar ships were learning similar lessons. The science vessel Times Deep Thought Times had converted its research equipment into improvised weapons. The medical ship Times Gentle Healing Times was ramming enemy fighters while broadcasting emergency medical procedures on all frequencies. But it was Sergeant Murphy who showed them the true meaning of human warfare. Murphy had volunteered to board a crippled Korthak vessel with a small team of Marines. His mission was simple: plant explosives and escape before detonation. But something had gone wrong. Murphy to any ship, came his voice over the emergency channel. My extraction craft got hit. I'm stuck inside this bucket, with about 10 minutes before my charges blow. Zexthari watched the tactical display. The Korthak ship Murphy was trapped on was heading straight for a group of human civilian vessels. Murphy, can you disable the ship's engines? Asked Captain Chen. Negative, ma'am. Already tried. These things have backup systems for their backup systems. There was a pause. Then Murphy's voice came back, and Zexthari could hear him laughing. Hey, Commander Zexthari. You still listening? I'm here, Sergeant. Want to see something really stupid? Before anyone could respond, Murphy had taken control of the Korthak ship's navigation system Instead of heading toward the civilian fleet, the massive vessel began turning toward the largest cluster of enemy ships. "Murphy, what are you doing?" Chen demanded. "My job, ma'am. These charges are big enough to take out anything within a kilometer. Figure I might as well take some friends with me." Zex Thari watched in amazement as the human sergeant piloted a ship designed for a crew of hundreds, racing it toward the heart of the enemy formation. Murphy was laughing over the radio, actually laughing as he flew toward certain death. 30 seconds to boom," Murphy announced. "It's been an honor fighting with you, crazy people." The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. When the light faded, 7 Korthak ships had been destroyed, including their command vessel. In the silence that followed, Zex Thari felt something fundamental shift inside his mind. Murphy had just accomplished the impossible through sheer determination and a willingness to embrace destruction as a tool of war. "All ships," Zex Thari heard himself saying. "New orders. Find the biggest enemy target you can, overload your weapons, and ram it. Anyone who survives, do it again." His communications officer looked at him in shock. "Sir, those orders violate, sir, everything," Zex Thari finished. "I know. Do it anyway." The tide of battle began to turn. Veltar ships, no longer constrained by caution and protocol, became as dangerous as their human allies. They flew into enemy formations with reckless abandon, trading careful tactics for overwhelming aggression. The Times' Deep Thought Times rammed a Korthak destroyer while broadcasting classical music. The Times' Gentle Healing Times crashed into an enemy carrier while its crew sang human battle songs they had learned over the radio. Captain Chen's voice came over the channel, weaker now. Her ship had taken severe damage, but she was still fighting from what appeared to be a life support pod. "Commander, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the remaining Korthak ships. I think they're getting ready to run." Zex Thari checked his sensors. Chen was right. The surviving enemy vessels were beginning to retreat toward the edge of the system. "Let them go," he started to say, then stopped. That was what the old Zex Thari would have said. The logical, careful commander who fought by the rules. But the rules hadn't saved Murphy. Logic hadn't destroyed those 7 enemy ships. Human madness had done that. "All ships, pursue and engage," he ordered. "No survivors." "Sir," Yelnara said quietly, "that's not Confederation policy." Zex Thari looked at her. And for the first time in his life, he understood what humans called righteous anger. The Confederation policy didn't save Murphy. It didn't save any of those human civilians. Today, we don't follow Confederation policy. Today, we follow human policy. "Which is what, sir?" Zex Thari thought of Murphy laughing as he flew toward death, of Captain Chen refusing evacuation, of children's toys being used to guide weapons of war. "Win," he said simply. "Whatever it takes, we win." The combined human Veltar fleet pursued the fleeing Korthak ships across the system, destroying them one by one. Ships held together by luck and determination delivered killing blows to vessels that should have been impossible to damage. By the time the battle ended, Zex Thari's fleet was barely functional. Most of his ships were running on emergency power, held together by improvised repairs and stubborn determination. But they had won. As he surveyed the battlefield, Zex Thari realized that something inside him had been permanently changed. The fear he had felt was no longer fear of the humans. It was fear of what he had become. Fear of the realization that once you learned to fight like a human, you could never go back to simply surviving. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had infected everyone around them with their refusal to accept defeat. And for the first time in his life, Zex Thari found that terrifying and wonderful at the same time. 3 days after the battle, Zex Thari stood in the wreckage of what had once been the Korthak invasion fleet. Debris floated everywhere, twisted metal, shattered armor. The remains of ships that had conquered dozens of worlds. But mixed among the enemy wreckage were the hulls of human vessels. Ships with names like Times, Hope, Asterisk, Asterisk, Determination, Asterisk, and Times, My Mom's Revenge, Asterisk. Each one represented lives lost, families destroyed, dreams ended. The humans didn't seem to see it that way. "Not bad for a Tuesday," said Captain Chen, floating beside him in a makeshift life support pod. Her ship, the Times Defiance Asterisk, had been destroyed in the final assault, but she had refused medical evacuation until every survivor was accounted for. "How can you be so calm?" Zexthari asked. "You've lost so much." Chen looked out at the debris field, her expression thoughtful. "We've lost ships and people, yes. But we've saved our world. Our children will grow up free because of what happened here. At such a cost. Commander, let me ask you something. Before this battle, how many times had your species faced extinction?" "Never," Zexthari admitted. "The Veltar have always been able to avoid such situations." "And how many times have you truly lived?" The question struck him like a physical blow. Zexthari thought about his life before meeting the humans. Centuries of careful decisions, calculated risks, safe choices. A life without true danger, but also without true triumph. "I don't understand," he said. Chen smiled, that strange human expression that he was beginning to recognize as something beautiful. "Commander, 3 days ago you followed every rule in your military handbook. Today, you're floating in space in a damaged ship, having just won an impossible battle by ignoring every rule you ever learned. Which version of yourself do you prefer?" Before Zexthari could answer, his communications officer's voice crackled through his suit radio. "Commander, we're receiving priority messages from Confederation Command. They want a full report on why we engaged the enemy against direct orders." Zexthari sighed. He had been dreading this conversation. "Patch them through." The stern face of Admiral Kolnash appeared on his helmet display. The Admiral's expression was cold, disapproving. "Commander Zexthari, I have received disturbing reports about your conduct during the recent engagement. You were ordered to withdraw and await reinforcements." "Yes, Admiral. Instead, you engaged an enemy force 50 times your size, using tactics that violated every principle of Confederation military doctrine." "Yes, Admiral. Your reckless actions resulted in severe damage to your fleet and significant casualties among your crew." Zexthari felt a familiar sensation in his chest, the old Veltar instinct to apologize, to explain, to justify his actions through careful logic. But then he thought of Sergeant Murphy, laughing as he flew toward death. He thought of Captain Chen, refusing evacuation. He thought of children's toys, guiding weapons of war. "Admiral," he said quietly, "we won. That is irrelevant. Your orders were to preserve our forces for a counterattack that might have saved an empty system 2 weeks from now." Zexthari interrupted. "Instead, we saved a living world and its people. Every human on that planet is alive because we chose to fight." Admiral Kolnash's expression grew even colder. "Commander, you will return to base immediately for a formal review of your conduct." "With respect, Admiral." "I decline." The silence that followed was deafening. In the entire history of the Veltar military, no officer had ever refused a direct order from high command. "You decline?" Kolnash whispered. "I've learned something from the humans, Admiral. Sometimes the right choice is the one that looks wrong on paper. My crew and I are staying here to help with reconstruction efforts." "This is insubordination, Commander. You will face court-martial." "Then I'll face it with honor, sir. I'd rather be court-martialed for winning than promoted for following orders that would have let millions die." Zexthari cut the communication before the Admiral could respond. Around him, he could hear his bridge crew talking quietly among themselves. He expected them to be shocked, worried about their futures. Instead, he heard something else. Pride. "Sir," came Commander Yelnara's voice, "the crew has taken a vote. We're with you. End quote. Thank you for watching. And quoting the scene, the Dayfleet Blig out place. The 22 plays. We're with you. And the Dayfleet Blig out plays. And quoting the scene. You understand what this means? All of your careers will be worth something for the first time, she finished. Commander, I've been in the fleet for 40 years. I've followed orders, avoided risks, and preserved forces. I've never felt more alive than I did 3 days ago when we charged those Korthak ships. Over the following weeks, Zex Thari worked alongside human engineers to rebuild their damaged infrastructure. He learned more about their species, their culture, their way of thinking. He discovered that humans didn't just fight impossible battles. They lived impossible lives. They fell in love despite the certainty of loss. They had children, despite an uncertain future. They built beautiful things knowing they wouldn't last forever. It's called hope, Captain Chen explained, as they watched human children playing in the ruins of their city, laughing as they climbed over broken buildings, as if they were playground equipment. But you know that suffering is inevitable. Death is certain. Why do you continue? Because the alternative is to stop living before you die, Chen replied. Commander, your species has conquered death through caution, but you've also conquered life. Which is worse? The answer came to him gradually, over many conversations and shared experiences. Zex Thari began to understand that the fear he felt wasn't a weakness to overcome. It was a strength to embrace. 6 months later, he received a message from Confederation Command. Admiral Kolnash appeared on his screen, but his expression was different now. Uncertain. Commander Zex Thari, I have received reports from across the galaxy. Other species are requesting joint training with human forces. They want to learn these new tactics. What tactics would those be, Admiral? The ones that turned a certain defeat into an impossible victory. Kolnash paused, looking uncomfortable. The Confederation is creating a new rapid response force. Ships crewed by multiple species, designed for impossible situations. Would you be interested in commanding it? And Zex Thari looked around the bridge of his new ship, the Times calculated risk asterisk. His crew was a mix of species now. Veltar, humans, and others who had learned that sometimes the best plan was to have no plan at all. What's the mission profile, Admiral? To respond to threats that conventional forces can't handle. Situations that require creative solutions. You mean situations that require us to fight like humans? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Zex Thari smiled, an expression he had learned from his human friends. I accept, Admiral, on one condition, which is the motto for our new force. Whatever it takes. A year later, Zex Thari sat in his quarters, writing his final report on the events that had changed everything. His words would be studied by military academies across the galaxy, though he doubted they would truly understand. Personal log, Commander Zex Thari, Commanding Officer, Confederation Rapid Response Force. Today marks the anniversary of my first battle alongside humanity. I have been asked to explain what I learned, what changed, why our tactics proved successful. The answer is simple and terrifying. I learned to fear. Not fear of death. We had always understood mortality. Not fear of defeat. We had always prepared for that possibility. I learned to fear mediocrity. Fear of accepting the possible when the impossible was within reach. Fear of surviving when winning was an option. The humans taught me that the greatest tragedy is not dying for something important, but living for nothing important at all. I felt fear for the first time fighting alongside humanity, and for the first time, I truly felt alive. He paused, looking out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them were new challenges, new impossible situations that would require impossible solutions. For the first time in his species' history, Zex Thari found himself looking forward to tomorrow's impossibilities. The fear remained, but now he understood what it really was. the price of caring about something more than your own safety. It was, he had learned from the humans, a small price to pay for being truly alive. And,